Okay, so just make sure that your work is all nicely presented, whatever date it is that you're doing. Asia Lesson 1, what is the Cold War with the title? So I did say on the video to stick it in as a flap because we'll have work to do underneath down the side. We want to try and save a bit of paper. So from the video, what's the answers? How long did the Cold War go on for? So 40 years. Who were the two main sides? We've got the USA versus the USSR. What were they arguing over? They're arguing over political ideology, communism v capitalism. Why was the Cold War potentially world threatening? Because they both had nuclear weapons. What does MAD or MAD theory stand for? So it stands for mutually assured destruction. Mutually, everybody assured, definitely going to happen, destruction. So everyone is definitely going to be destroyed is what MAD stands for. And it is basically because of that, they're going to not use the weapons. What happened in 1962? Well, it was the closest we came to breaking that or causing that in the Cuban Missile Crisis. The next thing I asked you to do was use your previous knowledge, and it said, why did the World War or World War II not stop with the death of Hitler? So if you remember, Hitler kills himself in his bunker and Germany surrenders to the Allies in 8th of May 1945. But Japan, who had been fighting with Hitler, was still fighting, particularly in Asia. So they're still fighting. Why did the USA want revenge on Japan? Well, if we remember, Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor, which was where a lot of their boats were, their aircraft carriers. They bombed them to make sure that they couldn't really join in, but they didn't quite succeed. They did in 1941, and that actually brought America straight into the war then. And then I've said make an educated guess. So your answer might be different, might be similar. Why might the USA need the USSR to beat Japan? Well, essentially Britain and France were done fighting. They were a bit too weak. France had been occupied by the Nazis. They needed to recover. Britain had been really heavily damaged by the Blitz. So it's not as though they completely stopped. They're still helping America. It's just they're not really strong enough to do the job with just the USA. So the USA still needs the USSR. And also, if we think about geography, the USSR was geographically even closer. They could just march down into Korea, which is what they're going to do later on, and use that to launch from Japan, where Britain and France are about thousands of miles away. Okay, your next task, should you have cheated, but just for later on, is to do your mind map and watch the video to annotate around. So if you just glue, let me show you. I haven't got any glue. If you just put glue on one side, and I'm using blue tack because I forgot my glue, and put it in the middle of the page, then you can flap it over so you can still annotate around it, but it means that when you turn your pages, they're going to be nice. So go and annotate that if you haven't. Where's one that I made earlier? It will look something like this, but without the sticky tape. And then pause the video and, well, you will have some questions to answer. Pause this video now to check your answers, to go do it if you haven't done it already, or you can check your answers in a second. Okay, so the answers to the questions. So a war within one country is a civil war. A war with lots of countries. Now, this is for the purpose of this topic, the words for this. But for us, a war when there's lots of countries involved is the proxy war. We're looking at Korea and Vietnam. 3, a war with no direct fighting is going to be our Cold War. The Korean War, 1950 to 53, came before the Vietnam War, which was 54 to 75-ish, 73, 75. Question 5, the USA developed nuclear weapons first. Question 6, the USA won the space race, landing a man on the moon in 1969. And question 7, MAD theory or MAD theory stands for mutually assured destruction. So mark, correct, highlight, focus on what you need to do, and then go back and complete the rest of the PowerPoint, or check your other answers as we go on. Okay, for the source demonstrate answer, so you had A, B, and C sources, and you had to identify the feeling, the event or person, and the knowledge. So for A, I'm going to say the feeling was critical, so it's like a negative feeling. The event was critical of North Koreans' actions. Knowledge, what do I know from my mind maps already? I know that North Korea was in a civil war with South Korea. I can add that in. So again, before I even know what's going on in the source, I've got some information I can add in, which means I can pick up marks. Source B, it said the feeling was critical. The event was of USA success in Vietnam. So the knowledge, I know that Vietnam was a proxy war for the Cold War between the two superpowers, the USA and the USSR. C, the feeling is a crisis, so a negative one, an international crisis. That's a feeling that they're trying to talk about. The event is the Korean War. So this one's a bit the other way around. Knowledge, the Korean War was a proxy war for the Cold War, which means more countries were involved, such as the USA and the USSR. Okay, the next activity is the worksheet that you need to work through. So have a go at that, and then again come back for some answers or some ideas if you get really stuck. Okay, I'm going to walk you through this just in case you got really stuck doing it. So the first thing I asked you to do is to look at the question again and try and work out some facts. Then you're going to do the gap fill, then you're going to do some sentence starters, and then you're going to have a go at your own attempt. So ideally you've done that. You can either look just to mark to see if you're on the right track. You can check the gap fill answers. I'm not expecting your sentences or your paragraph, your answer to be the same as mine for this. But again, this is just here in case you get really stuck. So the source is supportive. So that's a positive feeling of USA aid in Europe. So that's my feeling. It's supportive. This is the event, US aid in Europe. So straight away, I know it's not going to be a communist source because the communists against him. So it's either going to be from the USA or their supporters. Okay, aid in Europe. If I want to think about Europe, I know the Allies, so Great Britain and France, were their friends, and that also I am concerned about Stalinisation because that's one of the reasons the Marshall Plan went in. So let's have a look whether we're right. It is an American cartoon. I know a cartoon often reflects public opinion. So we know that from our Germany topic, and it can be positive or negative, but this one's positive. And 1947. So I know in 1947 we've got the Truman Doctrine is announced where he is going to split the world. So I'm looking, before I even look, I'm looking for some positive things to explain why Americans might want to be supportive of giving money. So aid is help. And it can be money. And I'm thinking about the Marshall Plan from my mind map that helped giving money to stop communism. And I'm thinking about that before I already go in. So ideally, I'd see a nice, beautiful briefcase or Truman. Doesn't always work like that way. So let's have a look. So it says step on it, doc. I know doc is short for doctor. And doctors help to treat like illnesses or diseases. So the doctor is driving in a fancy car, and it says Doctor, the US Congress. I know Congress are the people that give out the money in America. So they have to approve the money for things, and they are racing. They're racing towards Western Europe. So that is Germany, France, not Eastern Europe. So we're talking about France, who we know has been damaged by the war, maybe Great Britain and parts of Germany that Stalin hasn't managed to take just yet. So I know that they are damaged from World War II. And because they're damaged from